We're going to look now at representations of man in cave paintings. Now, Paleolithic paintings dealt primarily with animal subjects and were found for the most part in southern France and northern Spain. This is called the well scene, also from Lascaux, France. Same dates, 15 to 10,000 BC. You should learn those well by the end of this slide lecture. This is one of the few Paleolithic representations of the human being where he's not entirely disguised as an animal. Now, the bird head, however, may signify that he wears a bird mask. Now, how is the figure depicted differently from the animals? He's represented as a stick figure. The animals are done in a very striking fashion. There's great texture, there's a great variety of line, there's some sense of volume in the works, while the man is very transparent. Now, why might the figure be depicted so differently? First off, he's a symbol as opposed to representation. Secondly, and we might find this somewhat unusual today, it's thought that prehistoric man did not see themselves as being related to animals. And third, when you consider the purpose behind these images and the power that they felt these images had, man was afraid to cast a spell on himself. Now, is there a 19th or 20th century parallel to this idea? Certainly. Think about how certain primitive cultures were afraid that the simple act of having their photograph taken would capture their soul. So sort of the same idea, separated by thousands of years. Now, it's thought that the figure in this painting represents a shaman, a priest or a medicine man who could influence good or evil spirits. Now, the bird is seen as the giver of life and nourishment, and on the flip side, also symbolizes death through its association with birds of prey. Now, shamans in many cultures served as intermediaries between the human and spirit world and would assume alter egos who could communicate with animals. Now, given some of the suggested purposes behind the representations of animals, this communication with the animals could come in quite handy for the shamans. Why would he choose a bird to be his alter ego? So that he would go into a trance, and that's suggested to be the case here, in which he would experience a vision of flying and crossing great distances. This flight would serve to allow the shaman to do reconnaissance work, come back with reports of where the animals could be found. Now, perhaps this painting that we're looking at, this image, serves as a record of a successful hunt that could be meditated upon before engaging in subsequent expeditions. Here's an image called The Sorcerer. This is also from France, 13 to 11,000 BC approximately, only about 24 inches high. Now, this is actually a drawing done very carefully after the existing image on the wall of one of these caves. Again, this is thought to represent a shaman. I find that there's a visual problem with this particular image. The combination of the deer-like animal with the stance and legs of a man is somewhat clumsy. And the manner in which it was originally depicted is somewhat odd, in that you have very heavy and very delicate lines in the same piece that don't really go together too well. Now, the shaman here might be dressed up like the animal to take on his powers. Another possibility could be that of Wile E. Coyote dressed up like his prey, or his intended prey, or his wished prey, in order to sneak up on the herd. This image is called Ritual Dance. It's a rock engraving from around 10,000 BC. found in Sicily. Now this is a highly unusual image. Most of the images that we see focus primarily on animals, but some show man and animal together, almost in a tribute dance to man's dependence on animals for food. You might say that this is a happy coexistence, at least from man's point of view. Now, several separate layers of images are seen in images such as this one. There are beautiful lines here and a great sureness of drawing. This shares, I think, characteristics with the next image. This next image is by the great French artist from the 20th century, Henri Matisse. Now, the lines and the flow of the image in the Matisse drawing from thousands of years later, many thousands of years later, are almost identical to those in the cave painting. So great connections across great periods of time. Now we're going to look at the Mesolithic period in Spanish Levant and Northern Africa. Remember, Mesolithic stands for Middle Stone Age. This is a rock painting from Tassili in the Sahara. Dates from around 4000 BC, so we've moved through many thousands of years already. The Mesolithic period begins to distinguish itself from Paleolithic art in that the images of man become much more common. Now, what are some possible reasons for this? First, there's an evolution toward a more egocentric way of thinking. Man's beginning to see himself as the center of all things, a concept we should certainly be familiar with. Secondly, there's a move away from symbolic toward pictorial art. Pictures in this case are functioning as writing. Now, this image seems more a record compared to the shaman-like images of mankind that we've seen previously. The Mesolithic images are still in out-of-the-way places, and that suggests that these sites were still held sacred. Think about the connection between religion, so to speak, and art. It's very strong. Art and survival. That's a very strong connection in this time period. So we get the sense that art was of critical importance to the cave painters and the cave hunters. What's happened to the role of art in our society today? It's certainly diminished a great deal. Maybe things aren't progressing quite to the point that we think they should be. Now, the frequent thought was that art in the service of religion was perhaps the other way around with the cave painters. This is an animal hunt from that same cave, 4000 BC. We've got very lively figures here engaged in the hunt. Again, very different from the shaman-like images. This is, like the previous piece, more a record than a ceremonial image like we saw in the well scene. These figures look like they could again come right out of the 20th century and certainly share some characteristics with Matisse.